No man has had more influence on American politics in the last 10 years, and not won the presidency, than Bernard Sanders. Senator Sanders of Vermont galvanized the progressive movement in America, popularizing policies that today define the Democratic Party and motivate everyone in my generation at least. And he did that while losing the Democratic primary for president twice. But what if he didn't lose? What if Sanders won the primary and the presidency? Well, this is what, why, how, and that's what the video's about. If you like this sort of content, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel on Patreon, where you'll get early previews. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's rewind to 2016. Even though Sanders did pretty well in the primary against Clinton, this was not Bernie's time to shine. He had a better chance in 2020. Instead, let's tweak one thing about the 2016 elections. One key Senate race that nobody talks about was Nevada. Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto won the race against Congressman Joe Heck in real life by only a few points, while tens of thousands of people voted for independents. If fewer independents ran, or if Donald Trump marshaled greater campaign resources to Joe Heck, then the Republicans might have won Nevada. Okay, so why did I make this change? Well, let's fast forward to the first few months of the Trump presidency. If you remember, that time was defined by the Republicans' chaotic attempts to repeal Obamacare. After a whole bunch of struggle, the House passed its version, while the GOP leaders in the Senate pulled together the Health Care Freedom Act. Its key provision was to get rid of Obamacare's penalties for being uninsured and cut standards for insurance from employers. Even Republican senators were wary of their bill. That's because without penalties, healthy people could just wait until they were sick to get insurance, basically draining the whole health insurance system dry. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this would have boosted the number of uninsured people by millions, and the premiums people pay by a whole bunch as well. So it wasn't a good bill. Republicans knew it wasn't a good bill, but they hoped that by passing it in the Senate, they could then negotiate with the House through the reconciliation process and pass something better. Except John McCain, recently diagnosed with brain cancer and freshly recovered from surgery, voted against the bill. So Obamacare is still around today. But if Senator Joe Heck was there, the bill might have had an extra vote, enough to pass the Senate. The House and the Senate then negotiate their differences, and in the end, Republicans get their bill passed. Obamacare is gutted. Okay, so what next? How would history go differently? Well, as the Congressional Budget Office predicted, the number of people on insurance plummets by about 20 million over the next few years. Oh, and the bill also cuts stimulus money for health services, deleting jobs in that key sector. Good thing there's not a major pandemic on the horizon. On February 19th, 2019, Bernie Sanders announces he's running for president again.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
With the health insurance system on fire, his plan to expand government Medicare to cover everyone has the fuel it needs to become the #1 issue of the campaign. Other Democratic candidates also support the plan though, including Elizabeth Warren, Bernie's main rival in the left wing of the Democratic Party. But former VP Joe Biden does not support Medicare for all. Biden polls ahead of the other candidates up until states start voting in February 2020. Sanders narrowly beats Buttigieg in Iowa and New Hampshire, then dominates in Nevada, cementing himself as the front runner. Elizabeth Warren, seeing the writing on the wall, drops out and endorses Bernie. While Biden barely survives by winning South Carolina, come Super Tuesday, Sanders wins the majority of the delegates. Biden's campaign crumbles to dust just as the COVID-19 pandemic washes across the United States. You remember it. Skyrocketing death tolls, shutdowns, and shuttered businesses. But with Obamacare gutted, more people who survive are saddled with immense debt from treatment. And in May, riots and protests erupt across the country over the murder of George Floyd. In August, at the virtual DNC, Sanders accepts the nomination and gives his usual stump speech. He also meets with moderates and makes sure they're on board with his campaign. For vice president, he selects none other than Kamala Harris, which helps his weaker numbers among African Americans and women. Entering into the general election, Sanders tries to hold on to the Democratic base while dragging younger voters into the political process. In late September, Sanders and Trump debate. According to polls, Sanders wins slimly, since Trump spent the whole night calling him a radical communist. Sanders gets even more popular when it turns out Trump gave him COVID after arriving too late at the debate to be tested. Both Sanders and Trump survive, of course, but Trump's handling of COVID-19 is magnified even further. Come Election Day, November 3rd, Sanders does about the same as Clinton with rural and white voters, which is to say not very impressive, but he does much better with voters making under $60,000 a year and under 50 years old. Trump appears to be leading by midnight, but when mail-in ballots get counted, Sanders pulls ahead. Trump refuses to concede, but Sanders announces victory. Despite the revolutionary circumstances of his victory, the electoral map is actually pretty normal. Sanders wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania back from Trump, but the other states remain the same from 2016. So a pretty narrow victory for the Dems. Trump launches into a desperate attempt to find voter fraud. Republicans, scared of a communist president, lend Trump more support than they would have otherwise. Come January 6th, however, far from a majority of Republicans are willing to toss out the results. Vice President Mike Pence, a constitutionalist, refuses to stab a stick in the spinning wheels of the transition process. Enraged, Trump supporters break into the Capitol and key buildings across D.C. While a huge incident, there's not really much of a plan. Police toss out the rioters, and Sanders is confirmed the victor by the next day. Republicans across the country mostly condemn the attempted insurrection, but a lot applaud it as a patriotic attempt to stop the deep state communists from seizing power. On January 20th, 2021, Bernie Sanders is sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. Not only is he the oldest, but he's also the first Jewish president and the first socialist one too. Okay, so now we've gotten to the meaty part of the video. In his first few weeks as president, Sanders signs a bunch of executive orders reversing many Trump policies that everyone on the left hates, and strengthening the government's response to COVID-19. He also deletes marijuana from the controlled substance list and issues a huge pardon for many people convicted of possessing that drug. But Sanders has much more difficulty getting anything juicier done since he has a major obstacle in his way: Congress. In the House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi has the smallest majority since 1942. In the Senate, Democrats and Republicans are tied 50-50, with Harris being the tiebreaker. So right from the start, Sanders' ambitious agenda can only be as bold as the most moderate of Democrats, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. While Sanders gets his cabinet appointments in place, over the course of 2021 and 2022, Sinema and Manchin refuse to sign any bill with a national $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all, paid family leave, universal pre-K, or free public university. Other social policies like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act also fail, since Manchin and Sinema refuse to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, which means most bills that can't be loopholed through the budget reconciliation process need 60 votes to pass. So a huge part of Bernie Sanders' agenda is dead on arrival. But on the other hand, Congress does vote for a few major bills. Number one is a $2 trillion COVID-19 rescue plan, which sends people stimulus checks and dumps billions of bucks into other key parts of the economy. Number two is a reversal of the GOP's old Healthcare Freedom Act, restoring Obamacare to how it was in 2016 with the bonus of Medicare negotiation for drug prices. Number three is a $700 billion investment in infrastructure. Number four is an $800 billion investment in green energy, slightly paid for by number five, a moderate tax increase, and increased funding for the IRS to go after tax cheats. So a lot gets done, but not the full Green New Deal or Medicare for all. As it turns out, being president doesn't mean you can wave a wand and get everything you want done. Congress, the legislature, has a whole bunch of say in the legislative process. Oh, also President Sanders has to handle foreign policy too. Like any other president would have, he finishes the Trump deal and withdraws from Afghanistan, ending the war on terror after 20 years. This is inevitably a disaster, with Sanders receiving the blame. And in February 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Sanders listens to his allies in the Democratic Party and his advisors like Matthew Duss. He marshals aid to Ukraine. So entering the November 2022 midterms, President Sanders keeps promising Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. With Obamacare restored and taxes raised but healthcare costs and inflation still high, with disappointing but still gargantuan bills passed, voters head to the ballot box. Republicans narrowly win the House and the Senate, with the new Democratic Senator of Georgia, Raphael Warnock, narrowly losing against ex-Senator David Perdue by just a few thousand votes. After the disappointing midterms, Sanders is confronted by a looming domestic crisis, a threatened holiday season railroad worker strike. Sanders intervenes in the crisis on the side of the unions, giving them greater support, especially for their demands for paid sick leave. But freight railroads turn down the deal. With the risk of a strike growing, Congress intervenes and narrowly passes a deal with paid sick leave, which Sanders signs. So he does get that progressive victory. Entering into 2023 with a low approval rating, President Sanders is on the back foot. With Republicans controlling Congress, he's forced to cut programs to avoid reaching the debt ceiling. He also vetoes a series of conservative bills from Congress and goes to a picket line with United Auto Workers. But foreign affairs soon snatches attention again. In October, Hamas attacks Israel, killing over 1,000. While President Sanders initially expresses his sympathies and states Israel has a right to retaliate against Hamas, he quickly changes his tune when Israel strikes hospitals and refugee camps. With Israel ignoring Sanders' demands for caution and despite a bombardment of criticism from moderate Democrats and all Republicans, President Sanders completely halts U.S. arms shipments to Israel in November 2023. Congress even passes a bill to force him to send ammunition, but Sanders vetoes it. Using the leverage of threatening to sever ties with the country completely, the United States successfully imposes a humanitarian pause to bring aid into Gaza, but the fighting resumes in December with Israel doubling down on its invasion. In February 2024, ignoring President Sanders' threats of sanctions, Israel invades Rafah. In May, the United Nations, with the United States abstaining, recognizes Palestine as an independent country and welcomes it as a full member of the UN. But with Israel occupying most of Gaza and its ammunition stores drained, it switches gears and hunts through Gaza and beyond for the leaders of Hamas. The Israel-Gaza war fades from the front page. In July, with Trump and Sanders both securing their party's nomination again for president, the Supreme Court rules that the president is immune from prosecution for his official acts. This raises the stakes. While Sanders has many accomplishments to campaign on, he has more promises left unfulfilled since most of his agenda was blocked by Congress. Many on the far left, accusing Bernie of being a liberal sellout, pledged to vote third party. Trump, sieged by legal trouble, promises to save America from communism, saying that another 4 years of Sanders will turn the United States into the Soviet Union. What message do you think will resonate more with voters? Will Sanders win another term in office, or will Trump regain power? Comment below to let me know what you think, and if you want more videos like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel on Patreon. Thanks to those who already do. User SEQ, Marklin, Sheba, Caliber, Leon Whale, Goblin, Lily, 7-Zip, Sean, Lars, Ventrochromia, Jared, Omega, Quincy, Dionisio, Wheatless, Amir, Benjamin, Mysterious, Doe, Basit, Mimo, Lord Dan, Samab, Dreher, Channel 101, Freddy, Party, South Africa, Help Africa, Joshua, Eric, Aaron, Paxad, and LHC. Thank you, and adios.